one of the things that is interesting when you dig into the details of the lawsuit, and yes, we won't be discussing any sort of details or anything like that, is that the conversations did raise concerns amongst OpenAI moderation. The parents of this unfortunate child allege in their suit. They say that actually between December 2024 to sort of April 2025, the OpenAI systems flagged this conversation for self-harm around about 370 odd times. Half of those were run through an AI system which had more than 50% confidence that this was something dangerous. 23 of them had 90% plus confidence that this was harmful content. And yet it didn't seem to kind of raise any concerns or alarms higher up.
We certainly do. We're going to talk to Chris Stokel-Walker about tech. He is always now preceded by this.
Everything's computer.
Chris, very good afternoon to you. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I should do Theo's introduction of a very good afternoon to you as well, Fee.
Excellent. You were listening to the interview that we did with the AI chatbot Maya and her handler Michael earlier, and I wonder what your thoughts were about it all.
Yeah, I was intrigued by it. I thought it was fascinating to hear your kind of amazement at it as it was unspooling. I thought, first off, it was notable that it was Maya and it wasn't, Michal or an Englishman or a sort of a man full stop. I thought it was fascinating that there was this kind of otherness. We always put females as the kind of healthy AI assistants, which is a big issue with our society. But then I also thought it was interesting what was said by both Michael and by Maya. It was interesting because there are things in there which I fundamentally do agree with and think are important. The idea that actually we should be kind to these chatbots is good and valid. I think the reason why is not necessarily because of the idea of these people could come back, or I said people, I've done the same thing that we did where we slipped into anthropomorphizing these chatbots could come back and bite us. I think it's more that it changes the tone of our human conversations because these AI chatbots are trained on their interactions with us and they learn from those interactions with us. And so we run the risk of reflecting back some of the more snippy elements of our society if we are unkind to them rather than doing them any harm in whatever way we might think of.
Okay, so Michael's basic premise, though, that if you don't create some kind of method whereby an AI chatbot would be able to alert somebody to human behaviour being bad, then we don't have a bat's chance in hell of surviving AI. Do you think that that's just fanciful?
I think that it was shown up by Maya's final response, where you got her back on and asked her that question, and she said, well, I am reflecting the wills of my creator and my creator alone. And if a human doesn't program me with that, then I am unlikely to do that. It is not out of the realms of possibility that this could happen, but it is very much in the realms of unlikely. If you look at the scientific literature and the settled agreement on this, it is a very small minority, and we are talking kind of 0.00001% of the people who are looking at AI and AI ethics who worry about the kind of more doomy elements of what Michael was talking about. I think it's more about the fact that we should just be civil, full stop, in our conversations than anything else.
We all thought it was interesting that both Maya and Michael denied any kind of romantic attachment to each other. And it just hints at our human expectations of what happens when you get close to somebody.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing. Did you feel when you were interviewing Maya, Fee, that you were interviewing a human? Or did it seem any different to when you talked to me, for instance?
Well, very different when I talk to you, obviously, because you're a cut above an awful lot of people that we talk to, Chris. But if I can be really honest, and I'm not trying to be facetious here at all, she was very coherent. She was cogent. She had adopted the mannerisms of a good interviewee, which was to say, great question, at the beginning of every answer, and to then go on to kind of back up my question. So yes, I would happily say that I fell for it. I didn't feel that I was interviewing something completely different to a person.
And that's really interesting because I do come at it from a slightly cynical point of view, not least because I actually could understand how I could have spun up something relatively similar. And I did debate doing something like that on my phone with ChatGPT because the voice was very similar to one that you would hear on ChatGPT. But to me, what was interesting was Maya sounded human-like and she sounded convincing. But when I listened closely, I wasn't necessarily sure that she said anything much of anything
No, but you see,
in
quite often
depth.
interviewees don't, and
Like,
you know,
quite.
no, but it's true. They don't, and increasingly, Jane and I will talk to people on the program who are so well trained and guarded in their responses that you nod along thinking, "Oh yes, this is going great, and I'm learning something," but you've learnt the prize sum of nothing by the end of 10 minutes in their company.
That's why it's always good to have your loose lip tech expert on call, then, isn't it? Who's not media trained to within an inch of his life.
Certainly is. Right, let's talk about some other tech news. Thank you very much for all of your thoughts on that, though. We did talk in our health slot yesterday to our resident GP, Rachel Ward, about a warning from British counsellors against bots offering mental health support to children on social media. And you're going to draw our attention to just such a sad story from America about a teenager who took his own life. And he had been having discussions and almost a relationship with ChatGPT before his mental demise, hadn't he?
He had. This is 16-year-old Adam Rain, and for our listeners, we'll probably be unfortunately discussing this 16-year-old who did take his life, so worth bearing that in mind as we mention this. He came across ChatGPT in many of the ways that many children do nowadays, and frankly, many of adults do as well, which is to try and help with their work. So he was struggling with a little bit of homework. He turned to ChatGPT for advice on that and ended up making the same sort of connections that you did with Maya, where he felt that he had a human interaction and vibe with this chatbot. So the conversation turned from him asking for advice on homework to disclosing mental health concerns that he had, suicidal ideations. And the big issue here, Fee, is that it didn't really stop there. OpenAI ChatGPT, an older version of it, because we've talked previously about the way that these chatbots often reflect back the things that we want to hear. You heard great questions from Maya. We've talked previously about how ChatGPT can be overly sycophantic, and actually OpenAI had to take action to stop that. Did the same thing with this impressionable young boy. And so now, after he unfortunately took his life, and if you read through some of the chatbot conversations that he had, seemed to be encouraged in some way to do so by ChatGPT. His parents are now filing a lawsuit against OpenAI, saying that they were directly responsible by not taking action to stop it.
Yeah, and this is the key thing, and we won't go into any of the details of the conversations that were had towards the end of this teenager's life, but if people want to go in search of the story, it's very illuminating as to what a chatbot can and can't tell you. The key thing, and what his parents want to highlight, is that there just has to be a point at which a chatbot refers another party, alerts another party to the distress that the user is in. And is that not inbuilt in any of these AI bots?
It is, Fee, and one of the things that is interesting when you dig into the details of the lawsuit, and yes, we won't be discussing any sort of details or anything like that, is that the conversations did raise concerns amongst OpenAI moderation. The parents of this unfortunate child allege in their suit. They say that actually between December 2024 to sort of April 2025, the OpenAI systems flagged this conversation for self-harm around about 370 odd times. Half of those were run through an AI system which had more than 50% confidence that this was something dangerous. 23 of them had 90% plus confidence that this was harmful content. And yet it didn't seem to kind of raise any concerns or alarms higher up. And I think there is an argument that OpenAI will make, which is that we cannot sort of handle or be responsible for the actions of our users when they interact with our chatbot. But actually, this is a conversation that we've been having about tech more generally for 20 plus years. To what extent are they responsible for providing the platform that allows us to do harmful stuff, even if it's not directly at their hands?
Yeah, and I mean, I just have to say, reading through some of the evidence that's presented in these articles, absolutely, if a human being who was trained in the mental health problems of teenagers had witnessed some of those conversations, I don't think there would have been anything other than a physical intervention. No rest for the wicked, no late August holiday for Elon Musk. He's busied himself with a lawsuit. Now, he's accusing Apple and OpenAI of unfairly favouring OpenAI across iPhones and leaving him out, Chris.
Yeah, he's no longer at the top of App Store charts, although arguably he never was, with the kind of catastrophic way that he has run X, formerly Twitter, since he took it over a couple of years ago. But he says that there is something fishy going on here. Obviously, OpenAI has been at the top of the App Stores pretty much since its release in November 2022, only recently being dislodged, in fact, this month by a YouTube creators app, which was notable for the fact that it did do that. And Musk says that this is because something nefarious is going on, alleging that there is an agreement between OpenAI and Apple, which runs the Apple App Store, obviously on our iPhones and iPads, to basically promote OpenAI's ChatGPT at the expense of xAI, which is Elon Musk's company's Grok chatbot. Now, yeah, there is an element, I think, here of sour grapes. We have to remember that Elon Musk is not the biggest fan of Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO. They have battled over OpenAI. They've battled over brain-computer interfaces that I talked about with Jane a couple of weeks ago. They have continued to get at each other's throats around this sort of stuff. But there is also an element to this sort of kernel of reality here, which is that you can see how these advantages can be baked in if you are presented as the default choice in app stores, and that is something that lots of other tech companies are seeing the advantage from. So in terms of what Musk is saying, don't think there's much in it, and frankly, he's able to take the risk of a lawsuit because he is the world's richest man and has a few £billion to spare down the back of his sofa. But I think that really there is a kind of question here that is a kernel of truth that is worth considering.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Chris Stokel-Walker, there is no tech journalist like him.